Hello and welcome to the Apex Happy Hour. I am joined tonight with 3 authors from Apex Magazine 2021, which will be coming out very soon. But first, a note to our Kickstarter backers. Your copies of Apex Magazine 2021 have been delayed. You will be getting an official announcement with more information tomorrow, so look for that in your email. We are very sorry about the delay. It could not have been gotten around in any way, shape, or form, but Team Apex is planning to get those out to you as soon as possible, and you will have more information about that tomorrow. So as we tonight, we're going to talk about writing, and we're going to talk about Apex, and we're going to talk about these wonderful stories from 3 authors from the anthology. The anthology has 48 stories total in it. It is a massive anthology. It has all the original fiction from Apex Magazine 2021 in it. So that is 8 issues of Apex Magazine, because we had 6 regular issues and 2 special guest edited issues last year. So to begin, would our guests like to introduce themselves?
I can start.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Katherine Crighton. I wrote for Apex and in this anthology, the story Demon Fighter Sucks. It is a short story. It's a fantasy horror type thing that is about a young girl doing a live stream, and it goes terribly awry. So this is great. I'm really
very meta.
Yeah, this is very, and it came out, it technically got bought twice by Apex. Once before the pandemic, and then once after. So it's very am I a fortune teller? Maybe, I don't know. But certainly it was odd to see suddenly live streaming becoming a much bigger thing, at least in our day-to-day lives.
I can go next. My name's Carson Winter. I'm the author of In Haskins. It's a little story about people who swap identities via masks.
It's one of those stories that all of our slush readers were like, oh my God.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lavanya Laksminarayan, and I'm the author of Samsara in a Teacup, which was published in the Apex special issue about international futurism. The story is about being reincarnated via your digital footprint, and how your digital footprint is composited to give everybody a second shot at coming back to life and possibly even atoning for the wrongs they've committed. Unfortunately, things go very, very wrong in this story.
Yeah, I was rereading your story today, and I was like, huh, like it hits different now than when I first read it. So I was just kind of like, oh, okay, I'm looking forward to this conversation. So it seems like it's interesting because we decided to do this live stream, this Apex Happy Hour with authors from the book, and we just kind of threw out some invitations and kind of pulled 3 authors together without thinking about the themes of the stories. But I kind of like listening to each of you talk about your stories. I'm realizing that all 3 of them have like this identity part, and this Lavanya and Catherine's really have this technology and the digital and part. I'm also sitting here wondering if they recreated me, resurrected me from my digital footprint. What would that look like? So yeah. Katherine, you mentioned quickly, your story is one of 2 stories in Apex Apex Magazine 2021 that was actually bought twice, because we bought it the first time before the hiatus. And then we went on hiatus and we didn't know how long we would be on hiatus. So we released all of those accepted stories, and then you resubmitted it and made it back through the firing squad that is our slush pile. That is, like I said, there's only 2 stories that did that. And I think that it's really neat to be able to have your story have to go through not only, I mean, obviously as authors, you guys submit stories to mini markets all over the place. You're going through all kinds of slush piles, but you went through the same one.
Yeah.
Twice. So do you want to talk a little bit about that, or?
Yeah. So I tend to, I first started submitting that story back in 2016. I was recently looking at my records about it. It was a different story back then. It lacked heart. But one of my things is when I send out to markets, I think it's a good idea for me to, sort of see the reaction and response, and it kind of takes it as a way for me to move it on a little bit, what have you. But with the Apex one, I sold it. It was great. And then, but that wasn't the first time I sold it. The first time I sold it was to a magazine that has since folded. And it got released back to me. But I'm like, it sold once. Fantastic. I can sell it again. I don't need to edit it anymore. So then I sent it to Apex, and Apex took it. And then Apex went on hiatus. And I'm like, oh no, this is clearly a cursed story. And then I tried to, I sent it out a couple more places, but I didn't do anything with it really. And then Apex came back. I'm like, oh, the time. And so I tried again, and crossed my fingers. And if it didn't go, I was like, you know what, maybe this is a sign. But no, here we are.
Yeah, I'm really, it's an interesting story, because it is told through the perspective of a live stream, and you have like one person that's live streaming. Like, it's not a conversation with many people. I mean, she is responding to people that are commenting.
Yeah.
But it's mainly this one sole character that has to carry this entire story without having a whole lot of world to hold it up, right? Like, many stories you have, and necessarily why you need to have a world to hold it up, and rather you gave us like this situation, and it works so beautifully.
Thank you.
And then that ending.
Yeah, people talk about that one, and I'm like, no, it's the only ending that could possibly have happened. But I'm like, okay. I actually think that there's at least 2 characters, and there's the main character who's who we see. She's mostly monologuing which is what we do so often. For all I know, you guys are just little puppet people on my screen. I don't know. I don't know how real you are. This is what we do, and this is a kind of a world that we're living in right now. But at the time, I was just kind of trying to dive into what the fandom experience is like from the online perspective. You're just sort of engaging with people in this kind of, it's real, but it's also superficial. And my main character is dealing with a very real thing by kind of withdrawing into the superficial. And but the other character, I think, is the narrator, who starts out with just describing what the camera sees, and then
right.
The camera, for me, the camera is actually the eye of the other person, or the things that are carefully watching the character and waiting, similar to Labyrinth, when the goblins are waiting for you to say, I want to take my brother away right now, what have you.
Right. I was going to say, the one that's going, did she say it?
Yeah. It's one of the characters who's like commenting. She didn't read that one out
loud. So Carson, your story, you said, is about this town, and every year, this is a conversation that you and I had about this story, is like the timeline.
Yeah, I believe it happens every fall that the identities get swapped around in the town. And from there, the story arises because one person is struggling under the new identity foisted upon them.
Which is just a really, like, I want to know, this is one of those stories that I want to pick apart backwards and be like, yeah, but where did it start? Which I'm sure you're like, I don't know, Lesley. I don't know where it started. It started where it started in the story.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's just a fascinating concept to me.
Yeah, thank you. It was one of those when the idea initially struck me, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I definitely need to write this one. I need to get it down. It came from just kind of like a handful of different influences happening in my life at the same time. There was a Steve Rasnick Tim story I listened to on Pseudopod. I think it was one of his flash fiction pieces about Halloween Street, and there was just a little kernel about like I think kind of one of the big stings at the ending was a lot of kids taking off their masks, and it got my wheels turning a little bit. And then also I was working at a grocery store kind of before, right around the time the pandemic was starting, and I was kind of struggling under that burden of the identity of myself as a working class person, an essential worker, and kind of just, fighting with that constantly, being like, who am I? What am I? Is this all people see me as? Can I be more? And I actually started writing it on my honeymoon, which was taken surprisingly well by my new wife. She was absolutely fine with it. Actually, I was on the in the lodge where they shot some exteriors of The Shining on Mount Hood, and the atmosphere was just right to kind of start pulling all these influences together and getting it on the page.
It does pose a lot of questions about like what are the masks that we as people in a functioning society wear, not necessarily because we feel that those masks fit us, but because society expects us to.
Yeah.
And it's a deeply dark story, I would say. And It's very weird. And just like at the end of it, it's one of those stories that you're like, I think I need to go back to the beginning and read that again. like I need to go back now, knowing how it ends. I need to go back around.
That's
and
ideal.
It was selected for Brave New Weird, right?
Yes, it was, which was awesome. That made me feel great, obviously.
Yeah.
And also, like, In Haskins is absolutely one of my personal favorite stories I've written. So it's awesome to see other people responding to it as well, because that's also the one I'm rooting for in the back of my head. It's nice to have your personal favorite story also be other people's favorite of your stories.
You that word favorite is one that we kind of joke about among the Apex team, because I feel like every issue we put out, I'm like, this is my favorite issue. And then it's like the next one comes along and I'm like, no, this is my favorite issue. But I think that from an editing perspective, that's how I should be. Like if I was like, man, this one's all right, like that would not be good. So yeah, it's kind of one of those things where I feel like I'm constantly on social media, like, you guys need to read this now. And then everybody's gonna be like, why is she so excited about every single one? Well, because I am.
Good. That's how it should be.
Yeah, I think so. When I get to the point where that isn't my reaction, it might be time to look for a new job.
Yes.
So Lavanya, your story is in Francesca Verso's issue, the International Futurist issue. So it's kind of weird. Like, I feel like I'm on this other level with your story than I am with Katherine and Carson's, because I didn't get the chance to yank it out of the slush pile. like, Francesca brought us this beautiful issue, and I was like, yes, this is my favorite story. So tell us a little bit about how your story came together and how it came to be in that issue, because I don't think that he didn't take slush. We didn't have a slush pile for that one. So how did you end up getting connected?
Francesco actually stumbled upon my first novel, which was released in India only, which was dystopian. I mean, it is dystopian, near future science fiction. And he invited me to be on this series of panels called FutureCon. So it was a con that was done completely online during the pandemic. And it was lovely because I got to meet people from around the world writing in a whole bunch of different languages. And at that time, Francesco discovered my novel and ended up publishing it in Italian. So he translated it and everything.
Wow.
And so thank you. We were in touch ever since. And when he said he was, working on this special issue, could I write for it? I said, hell yes, of course. I'd be crazy not to. And he, of course, wanted me to write a short story set in a South Asian context because we are reflecting international futurism. Now, keep in mind that I just come off the back of writing this very satirical, but also bleak in many ways novel set in Bangalore, which is my home city in India. And so to approach this short story, which is Samsara in a Teacup, I wanted to do something that wasn't so bleak, but that still reflected my concerns with where the world is heading and where India is heading in particular. And everyone sees this rise of fascism and the far right. It's happening all over the world, and it's happening here too. And at the time when I started writing the story, there was this wave of hate speech against minorities in India, and it was disturbing. It was it was honestly rage-inducing to me. But I also wanted to try and create a future India where this is an anomaly, which is what I do in the short story. So India has snapped far past the far right in this short story. It is actually a very peaceful, idyllic society where love is encouraged and a spirit of humanity is very prevalent. And then you get this digital footprint that's reincarnated that spouts hate speech. And so the story is about how that is handled in that future society. And of course, all the defenses that you see from the far right that are used right now to defend their freedom of speech or whatever, those start being thrown around. And eventually the story reaches the only acceptable resolution, I believe, for hate speech.
Yes, it's a very permanent resolution. The world you create in that story, in my head, I'm like, this is beautiful, but I'm like, how long, like in my head, I'm trying to figure out like, how long as a society are we going to have to go to get there? And I feel like the world we live in today, I'm like, oh man, we got so far to go. But it I liked the way, because you have in the story, she's a detective almost, but like she's a detective that has to do with the resurrection, like, right? Like
yes.
with the technology. Like she's not just like a straight police officer. I liked the way that it was like she kept throwing out options on how they can deal with this, and her bosses are like, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. And then finally she figures it out, like the connection, and why this particular person was resurrected and why they're so vile, and she is able to then kind of use that knowledge to her advantage. And it is, you're right, like the way you end that, like these things when we do it and we're talking to people, and I try so hard not to give away spoilers. Like you guys can like hear me trying to tiptoe around saying what I'm trying to say. But it is, the resolution to that was just absolutely like beautiful, because you're like, aha, all right, like because you twist it to use their own ego.
Thank you.
You know, and it was really wonderful.
Thank you so much.
I really enjoy when we can pull in guest editors to edit Apex Magazine, because I mean, obviously Jason and I have been working together for over 10 years. We've been, I've been reading Slush and helping to pick stories for like 7 years. Like I know what an Apex stories to Lesley and Jason is. But it's really neat to pull in other editors and be like, okay, so you know what Apex Magazine is. Now you show us what your version of Apex Magazine is. So it's really great to get to read those issues kind of from a different perspective and be like, aha, so this is how other people interpret what Apex does. So it was really neat. Carson, you mentioned a little about how you wrote on your honeymoon, which I've heard that before, and that honestly cracks me up, because that is commitment.
Yep, that's it's peak writer.
That is like a level of commitment that I'm not sure even most writers would have. They might be like, my honeymoon is a day I can take off. But it does lead us to talk about like, what are all of your writing habits? Like, when do you find time to write? How do you go about it? Do you have a certain time of day or a certain amount of time? Or
for me, I don't really have any straight routine. I just try to write as much as possible. I think there's so much dogma that surrounds writing. You can easily get caught up in processes and rules, and but really I think as the longer I've written, the more I've realized the only right way to write is however you do it and whatever works for you. So I put down words when I can. I do it pretty often, but I don't do it every day. I don't aim for like ridiculous word counts or anything. I maybe like 600 words a day, maybe 1,000, whatever gets me to my goal. And I just kind of poke at it and try to be consistent. I follow my whims, any musings throughout the day. I think that's one thing that really changed my process, but more in like the pre-writing stage, is just being able to like ideate better content. And I hate that, actually. My day job as a marketer is leaking into this interview, because I just use the phrase content, and I hate that in writing. But yeah, to make better stories, sometimes it's just examining those little fleeting thoughts. You get those kind of like, funny what ifs. I remember one of the first stories I sold to Vastarian was literally, it was just based on me kind of walking past a lotto machine, and it had this video of a dude on it, an actor, acting out different like situations of him winning the lottery. And for some reason, it just kept burning into my brain every day. And I started like thinking about like how much he's like affecting this portrayal of like an everyman. And I was like, damn, he's probably like a local actor or something, like a state level actor, like a working actor. And I'm like, and then eventually I started thinking like, well, why does he seem more like an everyman than me, who is actually an everyman watching this? So, and then it kind of, you follow those threads and you come up with stories. So I think that's really, that's all there is to it for me, is I try to navel gaze a lot. I think about what I'm thinking about, and I follow those threads and I put them down on paper.
Fantastic. Katherine, do you have any specific writing routines or?
I would say that when I'm at my actually productive which is a different thing from the rest of the time. I'm one of those weird people who can actually go to a location, stay there, and then write an entire day. It's I'll just do it. If I'm stuck somewhere, peak writing ability. And then I don't always have the ability to kind of get to that spot. So the other thing I've been trying to really kind of incorporate in my life is, if I want to write something, it doesn't have to have value, or it doesn't have to be content. It doesn't have to be anything other than the fact that I want to write, because that gets me to that place where it becomes a craft. It becomes something I'm practicing, because I know that if I actually do it consistently, it's stretching the muscles. It's easier to do. So forgiving myself for the things that aren't saleable. I just wanted to do it. It reminds me that I like writing, theoretically, and it gets me to the point where I can be producing the content I want to at the quality I want.
Well, I think that's important, because I feel like there can be such the word that keeps coming to me is burden, but that just sounds really bleak, that everything that you write has to be something that is bought and sold and consumed by other people. And I don't necessarily think that that's a good thing, because you're going to miss out on writing things that just bring you pure joy. I have a very large hunk of a zombie rom-com that nobody will ever see. I'm writing it purely for me, purely to make myself laugh. And I more started writing it to get myself back into the habit of actually writing, rather than thinking about writing.
Well, there's a metaphor. We're writers, we do metaphors. There's a metaphor that the yeast that exists in your kitchen from when you're baking is actually individual to your kitchen, because every time you bake, it actually changes the culture around it. And so the more you bake, the more you change, the more it becomes your kitchen, your yeast. Regardless of whether or not that bread goes anywhere else, you are creating something that is unique to you and important.
That's a wonderful metaphor. Lavanya, what about for you? What does your writing routine look like?
I love the yeast metaphor. I absolutely love it, and I'm also here for the zombie rom-com. Absolutely. So for me, it's really important that I enjoy the process of writing. It's not so much about the outcomes, very similar to what Katherine said. And because I write across forms and do just a ton of different stuff with my time. So sometimes I'm working on short stories. I'm currently writing my next novel. And I found that my process changes just piece to piece, project to project. So there are some short stories where I'm lying on the couch, just, slumped over, because I've got this idea and I don't know exactly how to articulate it. And I just have to chip away at it mentally. And then the whole thing just produces itself in one go, so that's like a crazy word count day. There are other times when I know what I want to do right off the bat. So I'm just carving it out one word at a time. And with the novel stuff, I'm either completely switched on and, those are the good weeks where I can actually show up every day and create and put words down. Or there are bad weeks where I get absolutely nothing done. And then I just surround myself with, influences, whether it's listening to music that kind of gets my brain ticking, or watching stuff that does that, or even going out and just seeing my city, walking around, just trying to immerse myself in different experiences that could just light that spark off for me.
So you are in India, is the like sci-fi fantasy genre, like publishing scene there, like vastly different? Or are you feeling like you have to like think about, okay, well, this I'm writing for these markets that are specific to where I'm from, and these ones I need to write because I'm planning to go to an English market in the United States? Like, is that like two different writer brains kind of?
Somehow not really. And I think
Okay.
I've had to actually work to get to that place because it is different over here. I think near future political stuff hits harder and does better in India. But it's also very bleak to write. So, once I go there, I don't want to go back for a while. But science fiction in India is a pretty nascent market, like it's growing. So we're on, we're not at the crest yet, but there is a wave and that's growing, which is exciting to see. And because we have publishers who seem to be encouraging of what we want to express, I think that also lends itself as a great support system for me to go up and say, you know what, this story is set in India, but this story is in space. And that's just the way it is. And to still be able to find a space across both markets.
Okay. Yeah. I'm always fascinated to talk to authors outside of the United States because I get a lot of queries coming from international authors asking if Apex accepts submissions from international authors. And I'm like, yes, please send them to me. Because while Apex has a very specific feel to it, Jason and I are not looking to limit who is representing that, right? Like, I want to hear from as many different people from different walks of life and different ages and different nationalities like as possible. So whenever I get those questions, I'm always like, yes, please. Like, you do not have to live here in the US. We will figure out how to get you your payment, which can be tricky.
Which can be tricky.
It can be very tricky, but we are, we want to encourage all of those authors to submit. So this is, if you are watching this and you are not in the United States, yes, please submit your stories to us. After January 1st, we're currently closed. But we want as many voices to be represented as possible. And I'm always interested to hear from international authors because you are looking at two different scenes, right? Like, it's like the US has a very thriving genre short fiction market. But I'm aware that we're not the only market. Like, there is markets, and you know what I'm saying? So it's neat that you have to kind of be thinking about like all of these different things at one time. It feels like it would be like juggling.
It has gotten easier with practice is the only way I'm going to put it across. In the beginning, it can be a bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
But it's, what you do at Apex is amazing. Just being encouraging of voices from all over the world. And again, if, just like Lesley said, if you're watching and you're not based in the US, send in your work. It's amazing working with everyone at Apex.
Well, thank you. We have a comment from Jonathan Pickering. It says, the internet and modern capitalism has a lot to answer for in commodifying our hobbies and our fun and sucking the heart out of it. It's so good to hear pushback against it. I will always champion those books that you don't plan on showing anybody else. Sometimes those are very fun. So it's funny because, I've been answering questions and stuff about the anthology coming out, and there's a lot of questions kind of about why publish a collection of the original short fiction from 2021. And this is totally a personal, selfish reason, but man, I'm excited to be able to hold them all in one place. Like, to be like, this is a year's work like, and be able to just like hold it and be like, man, it's a chunk, because it is a long collection. Like I said, there's 48 stories in it. And I'm hoping you also have a I believe it's growing smaller, but there is still a subset of readers who only want something they can hold in their hands. Like they don't read digitally. They're not interested in an e-reader. They don't want to read on their computer. And I can definitely understand that, because there are some days when by the end of the day, I cannot look at a computer screen anymore. But so yeah, you all will be getting your own copies and of your own like chunk to use as a doorstop. I don't know. It's the massive anthology. We have another comment. Michael Bodwin says, it's interesting that the sci-fi is nascent. Oh no, I gotta hold on. From the slush, I haven't seen as much sci-fi as I have horror and fantasy, myth, demon, ghost stories. I love the different perspective. And somebody else said they just put in their order for the anthology. Yay! I love to hear that. I would say that our slush tends to lean dark fantasy quite a bit. Which is, it's funny because I have said before, I'm not a huge fantasy reader, but dark fantasy. So I'm interested to hear, like, what sort of things do you all read when you're not reading for writing? Because that's a different thing. But what do you read purely to make your heart happy?
I mean, I would say it's a lot of the same stuff for me. I don't think I'd be a writer for long if I had to only read for writing. I am always happy to read the kind of work that I put out. I'm really into horror and weird fiction. Christy Nogle's Beulah, her debut novel this year, one of my favorites. She is one of my favorite short fiction writers these days. It's so awesome seeing her blow up, and it's great to see, people I count as kind of writing friends. You could commodify that relationship in a way and say, oh, I'm reading this for political reasons to, put up the 5-star on Goodreads and visibly, be supportive of someone. But I am so glad that it's not my existence within the writing world. I'm so glad that, there's so many people putting out excellent work that is just, it's the stuff I'd be picking up, whether I was writing or not. But besides that, I'm a huge fan of Nicole Cushing. Her latest novel, Moth Woman, blew my mind. It's very, very personal. The authenticity bleeds off the page. It's like weird, absurdist, kind of Legatian fiction about, COVID, cryptids, and kind of the weirding of our own reality in the last 2 or 3 years. I don't know if anyone else has experienced that, but I certainly have, how weird the world seems. But yeah, I read a lot of weird fiction and horror, crime and noir, but that kind of stuff, it's what I enjoy, but it also fills the tank for me to be inspired and write my own stuff.
Catherine's got the look on her face like, have I ever read a book before? Which is when people ask me what I like to read, immediately I'm like, what are books?
I've heard about them. I'm not sure they exist. I wish I read more books than I do, more novels. But particularly in the last few years, it's been really difficult to kind of put in the emotional investment in something that I'm not sure is going to work out. And I need my fiction to work out for me now. And when I say work out, I don't mean like, it has to have a happy ending. I love horror. I love terrible endings. But I need to have a little bit more reassurance in my leisure reading. But I love reading short stories. I read across the gamut. Theoretically it's for the rating, but I also just, similar to Carson, I just like it. And that's why I write it. When it comes to novels, though, I think the closest I get is I can't say no to good historical romance. You know how those are going to end. There's no doubt there. I can follow the journey and be confident of the ending. And beyond that, I do a lot of weird nonfiction, a lot of primary resources. I've read most of a early 1700s medical dictionary recently. I don't know why. It was cool. Now I know a lot about, like, way too much about some things. And, maybe it's filling up the tank, but I'm doing it because I enjoy it. I have no idea what it's going to turn into. But I also don't have to be worried about, following somebody's, making sure that it comes to a satisfying end. That end happened a long time ago. It's gone. So yeah, that's kind of where my reading is these days.
I read a lot of nonfiction, and I think it's because I work in fiction all day. And so in the evening, it's like my brain can't absorb more fiction. And so I read a lot of nonfiction about very random subjects. Like, there's no rhyme or reason. It's just a weird, yeah. So I get that.
I totally relate to that as well, because when I'm writing, especially when I'm doing long form, I cannot read fiction. A couple of reasons. I don't want influence to kind of bleed too heavily into my work, but also it is so hard to live in another character's world and sort of share their experiences for the better part of the day, and then go back and do that all over again with a whole new cast of characters. It's too difficult for me. So I read a lot of nonfiction when I'm writing, when I'm drafting, but otherwise I just read across genre. I think most of my reading winds up being speculative. So, sci-fi, weird, and fantasy, that's my go-to, that's my happy place. But I'm open to everything, right? Like historical fiction, literary fiction, poetry, you name it. If the book speaks to me, it speaks to me. And it's very hard for me to categorize, where I will wind up next. Like, I can't predict it ever.
So we have it's a comment, but I'm going to turn it into a question. Michael Baldwin says that he would love to read more Indian sci-fi. Do you have any recommendations for authors that we should be looking for?
Yay, thank you so much, Michael. That's exciting to hear. Because Indian sci-fi is, currently a growing space, and there are a few authors. So there's Samit Basu, who
we've published a story. I was going to say today. A story came out today.
Yeah, the story is just out in Apex. He had a novel out in the United States this year called The City Inside as well. So definitely recommend him. Indra Das publishes a lot of sci-fi short fiction. He's got one novel out, and that skews more literary horror, I think. But his short fiction is very sci-fi, and I think he had a story out recently with Tor.com that's a time travel short story. So definitely recommend both of them. There's, of course, S.B. Divya, who used to run Escape Pod, and she had her book Machinehood out last year. And my debut novel is out in the United States next year. If that sounds interesting, it's called The 10% Thief, and it's out in March.
That's awesome. Now I'm gonna have to, like, as soon as we're done, break myself a note. Because I do read a lot of fiction, but I buy a lot of fiction. Anybody else have that problem where you buy way more books than like I could stop buying books now and probably not run out for 10 years.
Yep,
Yeah.
100% agreed.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Will put in the comments that Sumit Basu also wrote and co-directed a Netflix original film called House Arrest. I may have to watch that instead of wrapping presents after this. I know, it's very sad that I'm not getting that done. So we have about 10 minutes. So if you are watching the stream and there is a question that you really, really want to ask one of our authors before the end of this live stream, get those questions in now so that we can hit them. And other than that, I am going to open it up. Is there anything that any of you guys want to know from each other? Or is there anything else that you want our readers to know? Do you have something awesome? I mean, Lavanya said she has a novel coming out, so I'm very excited. Anything else anybody else should know?
I'll say real quick, I have a novella coming out in March from Tenebris Press called Soft Targets. And I will once again plug Brave New Weird 2. I'm in there. And in October, it was just announced, I also have a shared collection with Jolie Tumajin called Post Haste Manor. That's kind of like this. We basically just went back and forth on short stories, and it's like this shared collection of stories that take place in a haunted house. It's super weird, experimental. I'd almost say it's aggressively weird. It's really us trying to out weird ourselves, but it's super fun. She's a fantastic writer. She had a story in Black Static, I believe, last year that was just killer. And we're really excited for it to be released and people to see it, just because it was so fun to write. And, you know, when something's so fun for us, we hope other people are going to have fun with it also.
Is aggressively weird the official marketing term since marketing's your day job?
I guess so now. Yeah, it's so far out. I guess we can make it.
And she's like, enough. You did not talk to me about this before you decided to market it as aggressively weird. Oops.
Oops. Yep.
There's a question. I was going to say something but that I would love to answer. If there's a, can I read it?
Yes, go right ahead.
So this question says, if you could pick one existing IP to do a short story for, what would it be? And this is kind of nerdy, but I'm a big fan of taking advantage of public domain and when things go into it. And so from what I understand, Sherlock Holmes is about to go, oh yeah. And while I'm not a huge Sherlock Holmes person, I am a huge person when it comes to messing about with what's available and what's real and what's allowed and what's not allowed, but now it is. Mwah. So
do either of you, Carson, Lavanya, you guys have an answer for that? If you need a second to think, I have an answer for that.
Go for it.
I want to, and I can't, this is not allowed. So I may write it and no one will ever see it because it's not in the public domain. I want to rewrite I Am Legend from the perspective of Ruth.
Oh, that's interesting. That's cool.
Because I reread that book a couple of years ago and I was like, wow, the main character is really an asshole. And Ruth really is not at all. So I really want to rewrite that. But again,
you could Sargasso see it.
I'd be like, I'll just put it out there, like put it in a file, and then like my great grandchildren can resurrect it when it goes into public domain. Will just ugly laughed at my I really want to write it, but I mean, I don't have time to write something that massive. But anyways, Carson and Lavanya, do you guys have a secret wish that you want to fulfill, whether you're allowed or not?
I have such a long wish list, and so my brain's been spinning through all of the things I grew up reading that were so heavy as far as their like cultural influence went. But if I really had to pick something that left a really lasting impression on me, I would, and again, this is not public domain, so I'm not doing it anytime soon, except as like fan fiction, maybe. I would totally go with Neil Gaiman's Sandman. It just left an indelible mark on me. Yeah.
I think for me, I would probably do a Godzilla story. I was a huge nerdy kid, and I loved the Japanese Godzilla movies from probably the age of like 5, and currently to the age of 32. It's so funny because when you're raised on them, there's always the jokes about how there's like toy tanks and wires showing. But I did not see any of that shit. Like, to me, it was 100% photorealism. This is what it looks like. This is what monsters attacking the world looks like. This is just what it is. And they captured my imagination as a kid in a lot of ways. And they also, kind of got me on the road to appreciating stories as I kind of read more about them. I started getting like the nuclear subtext and stuff in the first film. So that is something that if I ever had the opportunity, that would be pretty amazing personally for me. But if anyone from Toho is watching, please don't sue me.
I think we can talk about what we would like to do. We're not doing it. It's just a secret dream in your heart that you're like, I want to write this.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I love it.
Hypothetically,
I would love to write it if I was allowed.
Yes.
I feel like there's lots of asterisks, like with like small text, like no writer in this production is actually writing these IPs that are copyrighted. Yeah.
But if you'd like us to, please contact us at.
Right. Yes. I am very easy to find, and I have all of your email addresses. So if anybody wants to contact, I can get you in contact with our authors. Oh, Jonathan Pickering said, Carson, write a Lagadian weird horror Godzilla noir.
So he's actually going to be kind of stoked because I've actually written 2 kaiju stories that are not Godzilla, but they are most definitely very bleak and Lagadian. So yes, and they are both coming out in different markets within the next year, but I'm not sure if I can announce them yet. But I'm pretty stoked for people to read them.
That's awesome. I will watch your Twitter space as long as Twitter is around. We are living in a weird world where I feel like every day communication with people who I want to keep in contact with could just like but I will keep in track because that sounds super interesting. I'd love to read that. All right, we are just about out of time. So this is the moment if any of 3 of you have anything else you would like to say, I will leave the floor open for you.
I got one. So I don't have anything coming out currently. Oh no, okay. But what I do have is I'm currently working with I'm in an MFA program with a program called Interactive Media and Game Design at WPI, and we are looking at creating a speculative fiction magazine, which involves things like very interactive media. So if you remember 17,776 or any of those sort of hypertext things, we're really looking at kind of developing that and creating a home for it and developing processes that we can share with other magazines to make it easier and lower that threshold to get those kind of works out there, because we live in a digital age. And yet, as you were saying, Lesley, so many of our books or our readers or what have you are very bound.
Very physical.
Exactly. So we're just kind of exploring that. So keep an ear out, keep an eye out.
I will definitely be keeping an ear and eye out for that, because that sounds amazing. We did have one interactive story in 2021 by Sabrina. It's like Girlfriend's Guide to Submersive Eating. I messed up the title, I'm sure. But she wrote up a very nice obviously it cannot be in the anthology, but she wrote up a very nice write-up about her reasonings for like writing the story and all of that. And it is available to read online. And it's very neat because it's got like YouTube clicks and like maps and like music and all of that. It's just a different reading experience. Well, thank you all for coming on tonight. It was very nice. This is the first time I've got to meet all three of you. So it was very nice getting to meet you. And it was very nice. I'm super excited for more people to hopefully get to read your stories, because all three of them are just so amazing. They're all my favorite for different reasons, because while I said that thematically they are sort of, they've got a similar feel, they're very different stories and taken from very different perspectives. And it's just really exciting that we have the opportunity to be able to like get this book to people, and everyone can read all of Apex Magazine 2021 original fiction stories in one place. It's just neat. I'm excited. So, but thank you for everybody who's watching. Bye. And we'll awkwardly stare at you now until